My stepmother laughed at my birthday gift before my father even sat down. She picked up the plain white envelope I had carefully placed in front of his seat, frowned as if it were something embarrassing, and slid it back across the polished table. Seriously, Natalie? A handmade card? My father didn't even ask what was inside. Instead, he sighed, adjusted his expensive silk tie, and said the words I'd heard my entire adult life. Please don't embarrass the family tonight. So I smiled and stayed quiet. Because the envelope wasn't a birthday card, and everything inside my leather handbag was about to make this the most expensive family dinner any of them would ever attend. My name is Natalie Mercer, and I was 34 years old when my father, Frank Mercer, turned 62. Frank married Claire when I was 19. Claire was beautiful, polished, and impossibly confident. She owned a luxury cosmetic clinic in Manhattan called Lumiere Aesthetics, and had spent the last 15 years reminding everyone she was self-made, especially me. According to Claire, I was the disappointing daughter, the quiet accountant, the woman who wore sensible clothes, drove a practical sedan, and never seemed interested in chasing luxury. She never realized that was exactly how I wanted it. Then there was my half-sister, Paige. She was 28, glamorous, endlessly spoiled, and had grown up believing money appeared simply because her mother expected it to. Paige married Victor Hale, a 32-year-old corporate lawyer who somehow managed to mention passing the New York bar during nearly every conversation. Victor loved expensive watches, expensive suits, expensive words. He treated every dinner like he was presenting closing arguments before a jury. To all of them, I was the only person at the table who had accomplished nothing. None of them knew I had spent the last 6 years quietly building something much larger than anything they imagined. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. The private dining room overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble, while soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Everything about the place whispered wealth. I set the white envelope beside my father's plate and waited. Claire entered first. She noticed me immediately. Her smile disappeared. Then she saw the envelope. "What is this?" "It's for Dad." She picked it up with 2 fingers. "A handmade card?" She laughed. "We're eating at a restaurant that costs over $1,000 a plate, and you bring construction paper?" The nearby server awkwardly looked away. Claire shook her head. "I honestly thought by 34 you'd stop doing elementary school arts and crafts." She pushed the envelope toward me. "I'd hide this if I were you." I quietly slipped it back into my bag. Inside that envelope wasn't a card at all. It contained legal documents proving someone had secretly paid off $4 million of fraudulent debt attached to my father's ancestral estate. Someone was me. But this wasn't the moment. Frank finally sat down. He glanced at my navy suit before looking disappointed. "Claire's right." I wasn't surprised. "I asked you to make an effort tonight." "I did." He ignored the answer. "You always show up looking like you're going to work. Don't you realize appearances matter?" Claire leaned back comfortably. "Natalie has never understood success." She smiled sweetly. "Some people are simply born without ambition." I took a sip of water. No response. Claire mistook silence for surrender. She always did. Victor decided it was his turn. "Natalie," he began, "I've actually been thinking about your future." Paige smiled proudly before he'd even finished speaking. "My firm is expanding." He folded his hands together. "We're hiring clerical staff." I looked at him. "Congratulations." He laughed. "No, listen. Filing documents, data entry, scanning records." He nodded confidently. "It's not glamorous, but everyone has to start somewhere." Paige clapped once. "Victor even said he'd recommend you personally." Claire smiled. Isn't that generous? Victor continued. Minimum wage to start. He paused dramatically. But the benefits are excellent. Dental included. The three of them laughed. Frank even smiled into his wine glass. I simply thanked him. I appreciate the offer. Victor looked genuinely confused. You aren't offended? Should I be? You don't seem embarrassed. I smiled politely. I'm comfortable with where I am. None of them noticed how carefully I chose those words. Because if I'd told them where I actually was, dinner would have ended immediately. The appetizers arrived. Claire spent 20 minutes talking about Italian marble she'd imported for her clinic. Paige discussed an upcoming charity gala. Victor explained a confidential corporate case in enough detail to violate several professional ethics rules. I mostly listened, occasionally nodded, occasionally smiled. Inside my handbag, my phone vibrated once. A message from my executive assistant. Acquisition finalized. Apex Private Equity now controls 73% of Hale & Partners, Victor's law firm. I locked the screen without replying. Across the table, Victor continued explaining business strategy to the woman who had just become his majority owner. The irony was almost funny. Almost. About 40 minutes into dinner, the head server approached, carrying the restaurant's private reserve menu. He intended to hand it to my father. Claire intercepted it. I'll order. She flipped directly to the final page. I'll take the Grand Reserve tasting menu. She looked around the table. For everyone. The server hesitated. Madam, that's $4,800 per guest. 5 guests. He nodded carefully. The total will be approximately $24,000 before the private dining service charge. Claire smiled without blinking. Perfect. Then she looked directly at me. My stepdaughter is paying. The room became silent. I looked at my father. He adjusted his napkin. I think that's reasonable. Victor nodded. You've lived off this family's generosity long enough. Paige laughed. It's finally your turn to contribute. I folded my hands. I'm sorry. I'll gladly pay for my own dinner. But I won't be paying for yours. Victor frowned. Claire sighed dramatically. I knew she'd embarrass us. Without another word, Claire reached into her designer handbag and placed an elegant platinum card onto the table. I'll pay. She smiled proudly. My company closed a $15 million investment this morning. She looked directly at me. That's what real success looks like. I almost smiled, because the $15 million had come from Vistara Capital, a private investment company, one that existed only on paper, a company completely owned by Apex Private Equity. My company. She wasn't celebrating a victory. She was celebrating the trap she had willingly walked into. The server disappeared with Claire's card. Minutes later, he returned looking uncomfortable. Madam, I'm very sorry. Your card has been declined. Claire froze. What? I attempted the transaction twice, he swallowed. Merchant Services informed us that every account connected to your company has been placed under a federal financial freeze. Nobody spoke. Claire stood so abruptly her chair scraped across the marble floor. That's impossible! Victor calmly removed his own corporate card. Use mine. The server nodded, inserted the card. The machine beeped. Red screen. He tried again. Another beep. Another decline. I'm sorry, sir. Your corporate account has also been frozen. Victor stared at the payment terminal. Paige grabbed his arm. Victor, what's happening? For the first time all evening, no one laughed. I quietly reached for my handbag. My fingers slipped past the white envelope, and closed around a heavy black titanium card. The black titanium card felt cold in my hand. I placed it on the table and looked at the head server. Please charge the entire balance to the Apex Private Equity Executive account. For a brief second, he simply stared at the card. Then he looked at the name engraved across the front. His expression changed immediately. Certainly, ma'am. He accepted it with both hands before walking back toward the payment terminal. Victor frowned. What's Apex? I didn't answer. 30 seconds later, the machine chimed. Approved. The server returned with the receipt inside a leather folder. Instead of placing it in the center of the table, he walked directly past my father and set it beside my plate. Authorization complete. He gave a respectful nod. Thank you, Ms. Mercer. The room fell silent. Victor's eyes never left the black card. His confident smile slowly disappeared. Wait, he leaned forward. That card belongs to you? Yes. The Natalie Mercer from Apex Private Equity? Yes. His face turned pale. That's impossible. Claire laughed nervously. She's lying. Victor didn't laugh. Corporate attorneys followed acquisitions every day. He knew exactly who Apex was. One of the largest private equity firms on Wall Street. The kind of company capable of buying entire corporations before breakfast. He looked at me again. What do you actually do there? I'm not an accountant. I calmly folded my napkin. I'm the co-founder. And I've been the senior partner for the past 6 years. Frank blinked twice. Claire stared at me. Paige looked back and forth between us. Victor whispered, almost to himself. You're serious? I am. Claire immediately shook her head. No. She pointed toward the black card. You stole that. Someone like you doesn't become a senior partner. I built the company. You expect us to believe that? I smiled. You don't have to. Victor suddenly remembered something. His phone came out. His fingers raced across the screen. The color drained from his face. No, he whispered again. No. Paige grabbed his arm. What? He ignored her. Instead, he looked directly at me. You acquired Hale & Partners. My law firm. I nodded once. This afternoon. Victor's breathing became noticeably faster. You own 73%. Correct. My employment agreement. I've already read it. My partnership shares. Transferred. My voting rights. Also transferred. The silence around the table became unbearable. Victor slowly lowered himself back into his chair. So, he forced the words out. You're my boss. I'm everyone's boss. Claire stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't own his firm. You barely earn enough to buy decent clothes. I buy clothes that are comfortable, not impressive. I've never needed clothes to introduce me. Victor wasn't listening anymore. His legal mind was racing. He knew exactly what majority ownership meant. Control, employment, compensation, termination. Every confident speech he delivered earlier suddenly echoed back at him. The minimum wage filing job, the lecture about ambition, the dental plan. He covered his face with one hand. Claire looked confused. What is wrong with you? Victor answered without looking up. If she owns Apex, she owns my career. Nobody spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. Victor. He slowly looked at me. I appreciated your job offer earlier. His cheeks flushed. It was generous. Paige immediately interrupted. Victor doesn't need your approval. No? I turned toward her. Then perhaps you'd rather discuss your charity. She frowned. What charity? The Hope Foundation. Her posture stiffened. My foundation helps disadvantaged children. It raises a lot of money. It certainly does. I reached into my handbag. This time, I removed a slim tablet. One touch, the screen lit up. Another touch, the restaurant's large display monitor activated. Financial records appeared, corporate charts, bank transfers, offshore accounts. The entire room became quiet. Paige's confident smile disappeared. What is this? The forensic audit. Victor closed his eyes. He already knew where this was going. I opened another document. The Hope Foundation collected nearly $8 million over the past 4 years. Paige folded her arms. Yes? That's public information. It is. So is the rest. I changed the screen. Dozens of transactions appeared. Payments, trust accounts, luxury purchases, designer boutiques, European vacations, imported vehicles. Every purchase connected to Paige's personal accounts. Those donations never reached the children they were supposed to help. Paige's voice trembled. That's a lie. I looked at Victor. Would you like to explain the Delaware shell companies? He remained silent. The offshore trusts? Nothing. The forged expense reports? Still nothing. Finally, I answered for him. Victor created them. He used his legal credentials to move charitable donations through several corporations. The money eventually landed in Paige's personal trust. Frank stared at the screen. No. His voice barely existed. No. Paige looked desperately at her husband. Tell them she's wrong. Victor never looked up. He couldn't. Because every document was genuine. Every signature was his. Every transfer had already been verified by my forensic team. Frank slowly turned toward his younger daughter. You stole charity money? Tears immediately filled Paige's eyes. I didn't. She couldn't finish. Victor quietly spoke. The evidence is real. Claire slammed both hands against the table. Enough! She pointed at me. You manipulated everything. You set us up. I gave you opportunities. You signed every contract voluntarily. Her expression froze. The $15 million. The Star Capital, I nodded. My subsidiary. Claire's breathing became uneven. You invested in my company? I did. You said we were expanding together. I said Apex would conduct a full financial review. You signed that clause. Her face lost all color. You lied. I investigated. There's a difference. I opened another file. Wire transfers, Cayman Islands, equipment invoices, fake suppliers. Every dollar carefully traced. Claire stumbled backward until she hit her chair. Frank looked at the screen, then at his wife. For the first time all evening, he looked afraid of her. Claire collapsed into her chair. She looked nothing like the elegant businesswoman who had mocked me 2 hours earlier. Her makeup was beginning to streak. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Frank stared at the financial records on the screen as if they belonged to strangers. They're fake, he whispered. They have to be. I quietly changed to the next page. Forged signatures, mortgage documents, retirement withdrawals. Every transaction was highlighted with dates, account numbers, and digital verification. I had my forensic team verify everything 3 times. I looked directly at my father. Claire forged your signature. She emptied your retirement accounts. She mortgaged the Hampton estate without your knowledge. She planned to move $12 million offshore before declaring bankruptcy. Frank slowly turned toward his wife. You, his voice cracked. You used my name? Claire reached for his hand. I was trying to save the company. You were going to leave me responsible for all the debt? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Frank pulled his hand away. You lied to me for years. The room became painfully quiet. I reached into my handbag one final time, the same white envelope Claire had mocked at the beginning of dinner. I carefully placed it on the table. Claire laughed weakly. What is that now? It isn't a birthday card. I slid several official documents toward my father. He picked them up with trembling hands. His eyes widened immediately. The county seal, mortgage satisfaction, property deed. No, he whispered. Natalie. You paid it off. $4 million. Every fraudulent mortgage attached to the estate had already been cleared. The house belonged to him again, completely debt-free. Tears filled his eyes. You saved our family. He stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. I'm sorry. So sorry. I failed you. I should have protected you. I let Claire poison everything. I chose the wrong people. I don't deserve your forgiveness. For the first time in my life, my father cried. Real tears. Not because he had lost money, because he had finally realized what he had lost years ago. He reached toward me. Please, give me another chance. I'll fix everything. We'll be a family again. I looked at him for several seconds. Then I gently took the documents back from his hands. Confusion appeared across his face. I brought these tonight because I wanted to give you the house. His expression brightened. I knew it! I knew you still loved me. I slowly shook my head. That was before dinner. The smile disappeared. I watched Claire call me a parasite. I watched Victor offer me a minimum wage filing job. I watched Paige laugh at my clothes. Then I looked directly into my father's eyes, and I watched you agree with every single one of them. His shoulders collapsed. Natalie, I'm begging you. I'm your father. I know. I held the deed with both hands. Then, I tore it in half. The heavy paper split down the center. Frank froze. No. I tore it again. And again. The county seal disappeared into jagged pieces. The mortgage release, the restored deed, the fresh start I had planned to give him. Gone. The pieces drifted onto his dinner plate. He stared at them without blinking. I spoke quietly. Please don't make a scene. His head slowly lifted. You. I repeated the exact words he had used against me only hours earlier. You're embarrassing the family. Recognition washed over his face. He understood. Too late. At that exact moment, blue and red lights flashed through the frosted windows outside the private dining room. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. The doors opened. 5 federal agents entered. Dark jackets, gold lettering, FBI, IRS criminal investigation. The lead agent walked directly toward Claire. Claire Mercer? Yes? We have a federal warrant for your arrest. Charges include wire fraud, bank fraud, tax evasion, forgery, and conspiracy. Claire's face turned white. She looked wildly around the room. Victor! He wasn't there. He had already left. Frank! My father never looked up. He continued staring at the torn pieces of the deed. Claire finally turned toward me. Natalie, please, stop this. I'll give you the clinic. I'll sign everything over. I'll disappear. Just make them leave. I calmly shook my head. I can't. The evidence was submitted this afternoon. The investigation no longer belongs to me. The agents placed handcuffs around her wrists. She screamed as they escorted her from the restaurant. Within seconds, the room became silent again. Only my father remained sitting at the table, alone, broken. I picked up my handbag. Before leaving, I handed the head server an envelope. There are $5,000 inside. Please divide it equally among everyone working tonight. I'm sorry my family caused this. He accepted it with both hands. Thank you, Ms. Mercer. I walked through the main dining room without looking back. Outside, my driver opened the rear door of a black SUV. I took one last look at the restaurant. Then I got inside. Over the following weeks, everything unfolded exactly as expected. Claire's clinic was seized by federal authorities. The Cayman Island accounts were frozen. Victor resigned after Apex completed its internal investigation, and his non-compete agreement prevented him from practicing corporate law for years. Paige agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in hopes of reducing her own charges. As for Frank, he lost the Hampton estate. He moved into a small apartment after the remaining debts came due. He wrote several letters. I never answered. Sometimes people ask whether I regret tearing up the deed. The truth is, I don't. I was ready to give my father everything. He chose humiliation over love, respect over appearances, pride over his own daughter. That night, I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped protecting the lies that were already destroying it.